Hey there, how's it going? Welcome back to this, the show on the internet. I don't know if that's like the catchphrase or something like that, but I haven't really thought of anything. I just think that was funny. Welcome back to this second episode. The first one was about growing up on the internet. And so now to contrast that, I'm going to be talking about what it was like growing up outside. How often I spent my time outside. I'm going to be comparing what it was like for me back when I was a kid, and then sort of speculating about what it might be like right now, because since I am in fact an adult, I can't grow up for the second time, even if I tried. Because I'm going to be talking about what my experience was like, all of this is going to be very subjective at the beginning, because it was my experience growing up. So I can really only talk about what I know about, and I'm sure that there is plenty of different ways that people grew up, but I'm going to be talking about what I know about, because that just makes sense. So, growing up outside, what was it like back then? For me, I grew up in a very suburban area. There were a lot of families around. There was a school nearby, so if you lived in that neighborhood, you probably went to the school nearby. If you were in that neighborhood, you probably knew those kids that were in your neighborhood from school as well. It wasn't guaranteed, but it was a pretty likely chance that you knew them from school. So you kind of already had that built-in mechanism to meet people your age. Even if they didn't go to your school, you could go around the neighborhood and find somebody your age probably. It wasn't too difficult. There were a lot of kids my age growing up as a kid. They would be out and about just like me. People were outside often. I mean often. Their families were outside often too. You might be outside yourself, and mom might be outside in the garden, or dad might be working on the car, something like that. Somebody would be outside for doing something else, and the kid can also be outside because the adult probably wants to keep an eye on them. That makes sense. So it's just kind of gave you an opportunity to be outside and still be safe and not have to worry about anything. Everyone knew, when you were outside, you were kind of safe, at least for us. Growing up, we grew up in a pretty tight community. I wouldn't say too tight community. It was a gated community, so it was safe. You knew that if you were in that community that you were safe and things were good. There were a lot of opportunities to do things outside. You could just kind of let your imagination run wild. You really didn't need that much in order to have fun. You could just go outside and play pretend. You can do that inside too, but you had a lot that you could do outside with that as well. You could go outside and pretend that you are on this grand adventure, or you could pretend that you are a Pokemon trainer. That's what I did. That's what I know a lot of people did as well. They just went outside and played pretend. The things that you were make believe about, it was probably based on maybe something you had, like a video game, or maybe a show that you saw, or maybe just general house vibe stuff. It wasn't too complicated, but we had the opportunity to let our imaginations just kind of run wild, and I did that as often as I could, because for me, being outside and just kind of playing pretend was fun. Playing games inside was fun too, but when you could be outside and just sort of enjoy the air and still sort of get into that mindset of like a different world, everything else is sort of somewhere else right now, and you're just kind of having fun. That was a good time. You could bring anything you wanted from inside, outside. Well, not anything, but a lot of stuff. You could bring toys, you could bring your bike, you could bring anything, really. Except for a few certain things. Like you probably shouldn't bring out your Nintendo DS. Even though you can, it might not be a good idea. That should sort of stay inside where it's safe, because when you bring it outside, that's just asking for something to go wrong. You didn't need toys in order to have fun outside, but if you brought them, they were there. If you didn't have anything like that, that was fine too. You could just work with your imagination. Growing up outside feels very different as compared to now. I feel physically, it feels different. The weather felt a lot different. It was bearable. The seasons felt more distinct. I remember growing up loving to see all of the leaves changing color and then falling down, and they were so crunchy, and you would try to find the crunchiest leaf and you would crunch it, and it would be like, that's fun. Just find the crunchiest leaf. And winter time had frost that would grow on the grass, frost that would appear on the grass in the mornings, and that was really cool to see as a kid, because you didn't get to see that kind of thing often. The summer times were definitely hot. I grew up in the American South, so things are very hot here, but it wasn't unbearable. One more thing, I don't know if this is just me. I grew up in a gated community, all that kind of stuff. So there was this ice cream truck that would come around in our neighborhood sometimes. It was very rare, didn't happen often, but you would always hear it coming because you would hear the jingle of the ice cream truck, and you'd realize, oh, the ice cream truck is here. I need to run inside really quick and see if I have any money, ask my mom or my dad if I have any money or they have any money that they're willing to give me so I can go get ice cream from the ice cream truck. And that was fun. It was just sort of innocent fun that you could have outside. I don't know who the person was that ran the ice cream truck. Bless that person. Thank you for making my childhood a little bit better. Ice cream is awesome. Growing up outside felt very safe to me. Even though things could definitely go wrong outside, you could get hurt very easily. You would be falling down and scraping your knee and having to come inside, bandage it up. That kind of stuff happened all the time. But I mean safe in like a community type way. Everybody was outside because they felt safe to let their kids be outside. If mom or dad had something that they needed to do outside for whatever reason, they knew that they could let their kids out and everything would be fine. Because they either have somebody else nearby who has kids and they can go off and do whatever they need to do, or the kid could just play in the front yard and nothing would happen. The parents right there, they can just kind of have their eye on them. And because the kids can just sort of go out and play to their heart's content, other parents would see this and say, oh, everything's fine outside, they're having fun outside, let's let my kid go outside and have fun with them. You would just let your kid out from an opposing house and you would just maybe ride around on bikes together or figure stuff out and go somewhere. It was fun because it was safe. You didn't have to worry about things happening in a neighborhood like this. You could just kind of leave things outside with very few consequences. Like if you rode your bike around with somebody and then you just left it in the lawn and you went inside and that was it, your bike would be fine there until you eventually came back and got it and brought it inside. You didn't have to worry about anybody taking your bike or anything like that. Because who would take your bike? The only people that are around here are your neighbors, and you all sort of know each other, so they're not going to be taking your stuff. It was just understood that you didn't mess with anything that wasn't yours. If it wasn't in your lawn, if it wasn't your thing, you just leave it alone. It's not your business. It's not your problem. You didn't have to worry about it. It wasn't like we sort of had no cares in the world. Stranger danger was definitely a thing that was very encouraged. It was taught actively. We knew not to get into a vehicle that was passing by. If they were telling you that they knew your parents and trying to get you into their car, the things were kind of sus. And so that kind of stuff still existed in the schools and also through our parents. But if you were in the neighborhood, it was just sort of understood that you lived there. Typically. It wasn't like 100% chance, but typically if you're in the neighborhood, you live there, so nothing's really gonna go wrong. These people, you know them. So what overall was there to do outside? There was a lot of things, and you didn't really have to worry about paying for it, typically. There were a few things that you would go and do, and maybe they cost money, but they didn't cost much, because prices were very different back then as compared to now. You could go to the library, and they would just have books that you could check out, and you could just hang out there for a while. You could go to a friend's house, if you had friends. If you had friends, you could go to their house, and I feel like everyone sort of had the one friend that had all the cool stuff. They had all the new stuff, all the Nerf guns, or the new game consoles. They had all of that. I was not one of those kids, but I grew up around some of those types of families, and I would go to their houses and I'd be like, wow, everything is awesome here. Everything's so cool. They have all this stuff that I don't have, and it didn't immediately process in my mind like, oh, these people live differently than I do. They're sort of different from me. It didn't set in immediately, but eventually I sort of understood that things were different. You could go down to the local gas station and just sort of buy something for very cheap. This is very subjective to me because I had a gas station pretty close to my house. I know maybe a lot of people might not be able to say the same thing, but for me, I could just go down the street pretty easily with a few bucks in my pocket, grab some ice cream or something, grab some candy, and just book it back to my place, and it would take maybe 10 minutes tops. You could also, if you had a friend who had a pool, you could go to their house and you can go into their pool. That's assuming that they have one, but we lived in the south of North America, so it was pretty hot. People had pools. You could go to the school. Let's say it was a school day, school's in session, and it's not too late yet, so it's still afternoon, not close to evening. You could just go to the school and hang out there for a while. You do whatever you want. Nobody's gonna kick you out for a couple of hours. Just sort of hang out there. You had whatever space was available in your front yard or your backyard. You could bring out sports. You could bring out a ball and just sort of kick it around and have fun. You could bring out your bike and just sort of ride around the neighborhood. For me, I was the family that had a trampoline, so I was the cool kid who had a trampoline. And everybody wanted to come over and play on my trampoline. And I was very proud of that trampoline. We had a lot of hurricanes growing up, and so whenever one of those hurricanes came around, the first thought in my head was always, what's gonna happen to our trampoline? Not anything about, our safety or is everything gonna be okay. I thought, oh no, our trampoline. It's gonna get thrown into a tree or something and it's gonna break. It just sort of shows you my priorities as a kid. I didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. This neighborhood that I lived in had what I called the community center. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you would call it, but I called it the community center. It was like a place that people would meet up. If there were like parties or something like that, you could set up a party there and just sort of have that. This community center had a pool, it had a small little playground, and it had a basketball court. So you could just go to this one community center and have a lot of things that you had access to. You could have fun in the pool. If you didn't have a friend who had a pool themselves, you could just go to the community center, and it probably wasn't too far away from you. It had a small little playground that had, your general stuff, monkey bars, slide, that kind of stuff. Very basic. But it was still fun. We had a basketball court, and there wasn't much more than that. But, basketball, kids like basketball. It was fun. So comparing what it was like growing up outside for me and to now, I'm going to be doing a lot of speculating when I talk about some of this stuff, because like I said, I didn't grow up during this current era, so I don't know what growing up now might be like. I might be very wrong in a lot of the stuff that I talk about, but for me, it just feels fundamentally different. Maybe the world feels a little bit less safe. The world might feel a little bit less friendly. At least to me, that's what I feel. The way that people live is different. There's lots of families that are going to be living in apartments instead of their own houses. When we lived in our neighborhood, everybody had their own house, and they weren't too different from one another, so everybody was just kind of on the same level typically. But now you have families that are living in apartments because it's probably going to be cheaper than having a mortgage on a house. Maybe that isn't true entirely, but it feels like it. It's very daunting to have your own house and have your own mortgage. There seems like there's fewer families living in neighborhoods, fewer young families that are moving in, or maybe that are already existing there, because the homes are just very unaffordable. These families that might want to live in this area can't do that because it's just not within their budget. So the type of people that are living in these communities are probably older, not necessarily retired, but older people. Maybe they had kids and they're graduated from high school now and they're off doing their own thing. So the parents are just kind of there now, and the neighborhood is going to be a lot less lively. When I was growing up, there were just sort of people all around. They might be out on a walk, just walking their dog, on a bike ride for themselves, but I feel like it's going to be less common nowadays. Apartments are very cramped and restricting for kids. You need to be very careful with playing inside, so you can't really sort of get up to that level of rough housing that existed if you were just sort of outside all the time, not having to worry about your surroundings. When you're playing inside, you're gonna have to worry about all your furniture, you're gonna have to worry about all the appliances around, so it's gonna feel a bit less free. So because there's less kids outside, because parents are wanting their kids to stay inside for various reasons, having less kids outside means that that cycle of safety that existed for me, people would see kids outside and see that it's okay to send their own kids out, so they do that, and it just sort of keeps cycling in that way. If there's less kids outside, it means people aren't going to be encouraged to be outside themselves. You go outside when you need to. You spend as little time outside as possible. It's not inherently less safe in these places, perhaps, because it's still, there's people that I feel like, people don't generally mean you harm. They're just kind of living their own lives. But it's like lacking in energy. People have their own thing, they're keeping to themselves, and I understand that. Just sort of keeping to yourself and living your life, you have enough to think about on your own plate. So you're not going to be out and about as often because you're probably at work or doing something else, or at school, something like that. It just seems like it would probably be a bit lacking in energy. Like I was talking about, apartments really restrict the level of intensity of play, because you also have noise complaints to deal with. You have neighbors. In a neighborhood, you didn't always have to worry about people hearing you, about what was going on outside, because they were far enough away where it didn't really matter. Like, you would hear what's happening and there's a ruckus outside, but it's not like anything you had to worry about. Now you have people up above you and they're stomping around and causing problems, and so if that happens, people get upset, which I understand. But it also means, kids can't really be themselves as often, and I feel like that is kind of sad. that the envisioning a kid just sort of growing up in an apartment feels very restricted and a bit depressing. Depending on the weather, some places are going to be too hot or too cold to be outside consistently. Like, even comparing what the weather is like now for me compared to what it was like when I was a kid, it is so hot outside. It is unbearable at times. I mean, they came up with specific classifications of how dangerous the UV level is. And if it's at a certain level, you're just not allowed to let school students outside and do activities because it's that hot and it's that dangerous to be outside for that long. So I feel like that restricts kids from going outside as much. Because why would you go outside when it's so hot outside? Even if, maybe you're going to the pool. In that situation, yeah, even if it is hot outside, it's not going to be that much of a problem because you're out in the water and everything. But not every place is going to have a pool. Or if it's a place that is really cold, it's just not going to be fun to be outside. And maybe this is just because I didn't know what it was like to be growing up around what it was like cold weather. So I don't know what it was like to grow up around places that had snow or that kind of thing. You see plenty of movies or cartoons where when it starts snowing outside, everybody's outside having fun. Maybe that is still true, I don't know. It would be cool if that was still the case, because then even if winter comes around, it's not that much of a difference. I feel like being outside and staying safe is very important. It's very present in everybody's minds. Even if you're outside very briefly, you might be thinking about what might happen to you. So in some cases, maybe you're better off not being outside at all. It's probably safest to just sort of stay in your own place. Get a security system. They have those Ring cameras, so a lot of people get those things because they want to feel safe. And this is neighborhoods and apartments, honestly. People are worried about what might happen to them. People might be breaking into places, stealing things. So it just feels a bit less secure. And because it's a bit less secure, parents aren't going to be sending their kids out as much. I mean, imagine living in an apartment complex and raising a kid. It just seems very difficult to me to be like, just send them outside and let them do whatever. Like, you can't really do that. There's not going to be that much area for the kid to have fun and just sort of be themselves. It's going to be different. They're either going to be inside. Maybe some places have like a community playground, even in an apartment complex. I don't know. If that's the case, then that's cool. I think that is something that a lot of neighborhoods, even apartment complexes, could invest in, and that would be beneficial. You have less incentive to be outside as an adult. Your kids are going to be inside more often. So like I was talking about, that cycle of safety. When you're not seeing as many people outside, you're not going to send your own kid out. You don't want to be out yourself because the same stuff that could happen to your kid could happen to you too. You'd be stupid just to leave something outside for a long time in this current age, I feel like. When I was growing up, you would just leave things outside and it was cool and nobody would bother. But now, if you leave a package outside for long enough, or even if it isn't out for that long, people just be stealing packages. And I think that really sucks, because having to feel like you can't get things delivered to your house without somebody stealing it, I mean, that's not very fun. So you have to install a security system and hope that that solves the problem. But there's plenty of issues that arise with that. People might wear a mask or something, and then, people that are trying to break the rules are going to find ways around
your fixes, so it just sort of keeps happening. It's not a very understood and socially enforced rule that you sort of keep your hands off of whatever might be outside. I feel like now it's more like, finders keepers. You know, if you find something and nobody's around it, you could just take it. I feel like growing up that wasn't a thing for me. If something was outside, to me that indicated, okay, it's outside for a reason. Like, it's not my thing, so I'm not gonna touch it. I feel like even adults are less safe outside these days. For me, even when I go out to my car, the first thing that I do when I get in my car is lock the doors. Just because it's a good thing to do. You keep yourself safe no matter what, even if you're not in an area that is dangerous. You still can keep yourself safe just by doing that, and that's sort of just in my brain now. The first thing I do, I get in my car, I lock the doors. When you're out and about, walking around, people can carry pepper spray these days. They might have a stun gun, taser, that kind of thing. It's just sort of an understood reality that you don't go walking around outside for too long, especially at nighttime. Like, if somebody was talking about the nighttime walks that they go on at 3 a.m., you'd look at them like, are you insane? What are you doing out at that time? Do you have any idea what could happen to you? And I think that's a sad idea, because why should we feel so afraid of being outside if it's something that we enjoy doing? You're even in a city, avoid walking on the same side of the street of somebody, even if they're all the way behind you. You don't know who this person is. You don't know what they might intend for you. You might have a little doubt in your brain, like, what is this person intending for me? You don't know. And so even as an adult, you can't really be sure of your safety these days. The only really truly way maybe you can feel safe is to have a group around you. And in that case, that's implying that you have a lot of people to go out with, and that might not always happen because people are busy these days. People have work, people have things that they need to do, so you don't always have the opportunity to go out in a group to feel safe. Now, there's a lot of things that you can do outside these days. I mean, there's so many things that you can think of, and they all sort of imply spending money somehow. You got mini golf, you got going to a restaurant or a cafe. You can go to the bookstore. Yeah, you don't have to spend any money. You could just sort of walk around. But are you really gonna take 30 minutes to an hour out of your day to walk around the bookstore, not get anything, and then just go home? That's implying that you drove there, probably, because you might not have a bookstore near you. So you had to drive there. You spent the gas that it was required in order to get there, and you didn't get anything. I mean, that just seems kind of useless, You could go to the pool or the beach, and that's definitely still something that you can do, but parking is a very difficult issue to deal with. Some beaches might charge for parking, and there might not be a pool everywhere. You have arcades that exist, and you don't have to spend any money there technically, but are you gonna go to an arcade and just sort of hang out for an hour plus and not doing anything? I feel like we are so focused on efficiency that when you go outside, you have to be as efficient as possible. So going somewhere for no purpose is just not something that you do, because it doesn't make sense. You have malls. I don't know if malls still really exist these days. I mean, they do, but not in the vein that they existed for me. Like, if you went to the mall and you just sort of walked around, that was just something that you did as a group with your friends, and it wasn't really a problem. You would just walk around the mall, maybe you would buy something, maybe you wouldn't, and it was just fine to walk around that area. And it wouldn't be a problem. But now, I feel like wandering around places and just sort of being places passively and not spending any money, that's really looked down upon. Especially like if it's teenagers, a group of teenagers, imagine in your mind walking around a mall, they're having fun, making jokes and stuff, they're not spending any money or anything. You think to yourself, what are these delinquents doing? What trouble are they going to cause? I need to follow them around and make sure they don't do anything. They're just kids probably trying to enjoy their lives. You know, some groups of teens maybe are that dangerous. Not dangerous, but they're up to trouble. So you need to keep an eye on them. If you are a store owner, you need to make sure that they don't mess with you. And that kind of sucks. All of these sorts of activities either require or sort of imply money, and going out and spending money isn't a thing that people really want to do, which I understand. I don't want to go out and spend money as often as I can, because spending money means you don't have that money for later. And a lot of people aren't in the best financial situation now, so they don't have the money that they might want in order to go out and spend time with friends or enjoy things just to enjoy them, because it's not worth it to go out and enjoy something for the money that it costs. It's difficult to get a group of people together and go do this common thing, because I feel like people flake a lot. That term flaking. You agree to some plans, and then it gets to the time of the event, and they come up with something came up, I can't go, even though they had talked about days before that they were gonna go. Everybody sort of agreed that this was the time we were gonna be there, this is the place we're gonna go, and maybe they didn't really want to go in the first place, but they agreed because it's when you get invited out to do something, it's rude to say no, so they didn't want to say no. But then it gets up to the time where you have to go, and something came up, and really nothing came up. You might make up an actual excuse and just say, I can't go. What is available around you is gonna depend on where you live. For me, it feels like there's nothing around here that I actively would enjoy going to. And that makes me pretty sad, because I would love to go outside and just sort of spend time doing stuff that I enjoyed. But because none of that stuff exists around me, I just sort of don't view it as possible. Even if it's stuff that actually exists, I just don't know about it, because it's hard to sort of know everything about where you live, because you're not going out as much. You don't have all the time in the world and all the money in the world to sort of explore your surroundings. I feel like having friends these days is very different. Some people might not even have friends these days. I feel like it is more common now for people to have less friends. It is more common for people to have no friends. I mean, how often do you spend time out and about with friends in a given week? Just off the top of your head, how often do you go out with friends? How many hours do you spend? A couple hours? 4 hours? 5 hours? 10 hours? I feel like it's probably not that many. Not that much time spent out with people. If you go out, you're probably going out alone. You know, eating by yourself seems a bit more common now. You don't have to pay for two people. And you just go out, you do your thing, you come back. The things that people talk about when they are together, I feel like even still, it's gonna be about things in their life like work or what's happening with their families. It's not gonna be, things that they're interested in or current events might be something that you talk about. It's also depends on the group that you're with. Maybe that group of people that you're with don't really talk about current events because politics can get messy. So people don't really want to offend, and so you don't talk about anything. If you do have time to spend, you might just spend it at home with your family. Even if you could go out and do stuff, I feel like people are just sort of home a lot these days, and that's because of the big C word, COVID. COVID really screwed up a lot of people's social skills and their social groups. That happened to me. And part of that, when COVID first happened, that split up a bunch of groups of people, and it never sort of recovered. I can't really blame COVID now for if I don't have friends, because it's really not a problem that you deal with anymore, but that lasting impact is still there. We still sort of don't want to go out often, and that kind of sucks. When I was in college, you could only have a certain amount of people out in the common areas. Maybe you could have 4 people, and you'd have to be masked up and everything. COVID was a really sucky time to be growing up, I'm sure. And I say growing up as in, for me, I was sort of coming into my own as an adult. I can only imagine how difficult it must have been for kids growing up during COVID. They don't have all of their friends around them anymore. And so, because they don't have their friends around them, they feel less like friends. Because you can't go see them as often. Even, I feel like teenagers, they probably don't spend out much time with friends. If they have time to spend, it's probably at school, or maybe they have work, or they're probably just on their phones, just like the rest of us. And screen time is something that I've already talked about before. I mean, the amount of time that we spend on our screens is crazy. 9 hours some people are spending on their phone. You might look at your weekly time spending habits, because phones can do that kind of thing, and it shows you how many hours you spent per day. And what was your average time spent on TikTok for the past week? It was 13 hours. That's where all that time that you could be spending with friends went to. It's on your phone, which, for me, that is the case. I'm probably on a screen most of the day, on my computer or on my phone, and then little breaks in between where I might go outside and do something if I have to. One-on-one friendships are definitely, I feel like, still a thing, and they're probably a lot deeper, honestly, because you don't have as many people around, so it's just kind of that intimate relationship, like, this is my friend, I'm here to do stuff with them. It doesn't necessarily imply that you're hanging out outside together, but those sorts of friendships probably still exist. But they also, for me, I know a lot of friendships have just sort of fizzled out. They don't really exist anymore. If that person were to come to me and start talking to me, I think I'd be completely fine talking with them, but it's not something that happens, so you never talk to anybody about that kind of stuff. Like, hey, let's catch up and talk about whatever. I feel like people don't really want to do that. They don't want to go back to the old friends and talk about stuff for a couple of hours and then leave, because you could have just texted about that. That sort of defeats the purpose of hanging out outside together, and you could just text it. And I feel like people do have that mindset. We could have talked about this over the phone. The places that we would spend all of our time at, this idea of third space, is somewhere that's not home, it's not school, or it's not work. It's that third place that you can go to and spend time, like a mall or an arcade, a park, a library, things like that. They don't really exist anymore. And if they do exist, they're going to require money and transportation. And I've already talked about that not everybody wants to spend money or get involved with transportation and drive somewhere because it just feels like a waste. So those places probably don't exist as much anymore. And that sucks, because if you think to yourself, where could I spend time? Just go somewhere and spend time. There's not that many places, because you're gonna be looked at as loitering. If you go somewhere and you're not spending money, you're loitering. And I get that. That actually probably does happen. So businesses do have to make sure that nobody's actually loitering and just wasting time there. And I've seen forums of people being like, if you just go to a cafe and ask for a cup of water, they probably don't have a problem with that, and they'll give it to you because I think they understand that, you're trying to spend time here, but you need to spend time here as a customer. You can't spend time somewhere just as a person anymore, or a group of people. You need to spend your money somewhere. It's all sort of based around money now, and spending money. And that's not something that I really enjoy doing. Even if I did have friends and I wanted to go out, I don't really want to go out and spend money. Sometimes you just treat yourself to something nice just because you feel like it. But it's a different thing when you're treating yourself to something as compared to going out and spending money with friends. I feel like that's probably a lot less common. And on dates too, honestly. I don't know how that's like, me personally. Going out and spending time with somebody, and money and transportation, just for maybe, the date to not go very well, or the relationship to not work out very well. That seems like a waste of time. So you say, what's the point? Why bother? The cities that we live in are just less friendly to groups of people looking to have fun outside. And if you're like a group of adults trying to do that stuff, you're just going to be looked at as kind of weird. Like, what are these people doing? Just kind of going out somewhere? Don't you have work to go do? Don't you have things to go do? I wish that I would have nothing to do and I could just go outside and be with a group of friends and have fun. I feel that desire to go out with people and just sort of hang, because I had a lot of that growing up, and so that's normal to me. But it's become a lot less common now, and in my head I'm thinking that it's not as normal to do such a thing, and that's sad. I want to go out and spend time with people, but it doesn't seem as possible these days. Making friends and keeping those friends, it's difficult. It's really difficult. You can have places that you can go to meet people specifically, but again, it comes down to money and transportation. And some of those places have reputations. Like if you're going to a bar just to meet people, you're probably just wanting to hook up with someone. That's the reputation that you sort of have surrounding bars. So if you are genuinely wanting to just spend time with people outside, people are going to be assuming things that maybe you aren't aware of, or you might be aware of it, but you're not trying to spend your time in that way, but people don't know that. If you go to the gym, you're probably wanting to just sort of be there passively and not be bothered. There's a lot of videos of people recording other people at the gym because, I'm just trying to do whatever it is that I'm trying to do, and this person's looking at me or they're bothering me. I mean, maybe that person just wanted like someone to talk to. They wanted to just connect with somebody, and now it's just not a thing that happens. You don't go up to people just randomly. I talked about this last time with the internet and people not feeling safe outside, and it was just kind of weird to go up and talk to people. And I understand not wanting to be bothered outside, but we don't have many opportunities available to us these days to do that and not have to worry about something else. So, wrapping everything up, growing up outside was such an incredible experience for me. I love being outside. I still love being outside, and that sort of childlike whimsy that you had growing up is something that I want to be able to feel again. That nostalgia, I feel like it's more than just nostalgia. You genuinely want to experience that, but even as an adult, you can do that kind of stuff. I can only imagine what it is like for kids to grow up in this current era. I've only have the ideas that I've seen on the internet or through other methods of what it might be like for kids to grow up. Schools are going to be a lot different these days for kids. Everything is very digital now, and so people are really just not spending as much time with people. And I don't know exactly how you can fix that sort of thing. I know, I'm just one dude, but together maybe we'd be able to think of some sort of thing. And I mean, we, like, society can come up with some sort of method in order to allow us to enjoy ourselves outside while being able to live our regular lives, working or spending time with family or traveling. But I feel like a lot of kids aren't going to be able to have that experience that I had growing up, and that is sad, because that sort of childlike whimsy, maybe they don't get to experience that anymore. And if that is the case, well, that's a pretty sad world that we live in if we aren't allowed to have our kids enjoy themselves outside for various reasons. I think there's definitely things that we can do about that. We could try actively to go out more, even though it might be hard for us to shake the idea that we have in our head that if you go outside and spend money on things, it's a waste of time. That's something we have to buck off, and that's gonna be difficult. I feel like it's difficult for me. I have a very ingrained belief in me that going outside and spending money seems like a waste. Even though deep down in me I want to go outside and spend time with people, I have spent my time in such a way for so long that it just doesn't seem natural to me anymore. I don't have that opportunity that I did when I was a kid to just sort of exist outside. And yeah, that's just kind of how things are. And as an adult, growing up and becoming an adult, yeah, it does kind of suck in that aspect. But it doesn't mean you have to lose access to that interest that you might have, or that thing that you might want to do, because having a hobby is definitely the best way in order to get rid of that sense of nothingness, that sense of like, oh, I'm missing a purpose. I feel that often. And so you need to come up with some way to fill the time. And a lot of people fill that with digital content, myself included. and that doesn't really get away from the issues that we're dealing with. So it really comes down to a societal sort of reset, and I don't know exactly how you do that. How do we just reset something that we've experienced for so long and go back to quote unquote normal? You know, what is normal now is not what is normal for everybody. What is normal now is not what was normal for me. I'd like to believe, though, that there's something that we can figure out as a society, and it's probably just gonna come down to less technology. Even though that sounds cliche, I think maybe it is cliche, but I think it still might be true. We are so focused on technology that we have sort of lost ourselves, and in order to find ourselves again, we're gonna have to push ourselves really hard because we're addicted to our screens, and so fighting that addiction is gonna be difficult. And there's ways that we can do that. There's a lot of websites that I think are dedicated to events happening nearby places. If you look up, you know, what are some events happening nearby me? There might be a meetup of people that are just trying to meet up and have fun doing whatever. It might be just talking to people, it might be some certain activity that binds everyone together under that sort of group mindset. Like you're all together going to do one thing, and that helps sort of break the ice. But you might not enjoy those things that those events are catered around, so in that case, you know, what do you do? Maybe you have to figure out your own method. Maybe it has to just come down to you being the one to start it up. Like if you really enjoy video games or watching movies, watching anime, that kind of thing, maybe you could get some sort of group of people together that, you know, comes together once a week, twice a week, just to watch something. And that's kind of how you just sort of start community. And that might be difficult to do based on where you live. I feel like for me it's probably difficult because I don't think people my age live around me, and that's just my perception. It might not be the case, but to me it feels like people my age don't really exist around me. So this thing that I want to do with people, I can't really do because nobody around me enjoys the same types of things as me. But maybe they do exist, I just don't know they exist. Because they are also thinking the exact same thing, that nobody around me does the stuff that I like. And so, you know, they don't do anything about it. They don't go out looking for that kind of information. What people are doing around me. What sort of things do they do? You don't really worry about that kind of stuff. You just think, nah, there's nothing. There's nothing I can do about it, and we sort of give up. But maybe it just has to be you breaking that, not glass ceiling, breaking that barrier that exists, that you think exists, because you think that nobody around you is like you. They might be there. You just might not know it. So, I would just like to say, thanks for listening. Have a good one.